What if the prince you trusted the most was secretly plotting against your own family? What if behind the polished smiles, public appearances, and carefully curated headlines, a storm was brewing? A storm that could shake the foundations of the royal family forever. Imagine watching your sibling, someone you grew up with, someone you trusted with your secrets, working hand in hand with a team of strategists and media experts to manipulate stories, to shape public opinion, and ultimately, to tarnish the reputation of the woman you love and the mother of your children. Could you believe it? Could you even process it? And yet, for Prince William, this nightmare wasn't hypothetical. It was real, unfolding in secret, hidden in whispers, private emails, and carefully orchestrated leaks. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It all began with the faintest whisper of suspicion. William had noticed subtle changes, little inconsistencies that didn't sit right. Certain stories would surface just when Kate seemed to be enjoying a rare moment of peace. Headlines that seemed coincidental were suddenly, when examined closely, part of a pattern. And when he finally traced them, what he discovered sent a shiver down his spine. His own brother, Prince Harry, allegedly, was not only aware of these leaks, but might have been actively facilitating them. Through Meghan's PR team, working behind the scenes. With precision, with intent. Think about that for a moment. One sibling allegedly manipulating the narrative to undermine another. One prince possibly exploiting media channels, timing, and public perception for personal gain. And the target? Kate Middleton, Duchess of Cambridge. The poised, elegant, yet quietly strong woman who had dedicated herself to her family, her charitable work, and her children. To see her name twisted, her reputation subtly attacked, in ways that only insiders could perceive, this was personal. And for William, the sense of betrayal was immediate and visceral. But let's step back. Let's set the stage properly. William and Harry grew up in the shadow of royal expectation, under the weight of public scrutiny, with cameras following every move and every misstep magnified. Their mother, Princess Diana, had shown them the consequences of media manipulation, the dangers of narratives spun without their control. And yet, as adults, here was Harry, allegedly repeating patterns of secrecy and manipulation, this time targeting his own family. The contrast was striking. William, who had always carried a sense of duty, who had cultivated a reputation of measured composure, suddenly found himself facing a situation that demanded action, that demanded clarity, that demanded confrontation. The pieces of the puzzle began to emerge slowly, methodically. It wasn't a single message, a single story, or a single suspicious interaction that triggered alarm. It was a series of events, each small on its own, but cumulatively impossible to ignore. A seemingly innocent text, a casual mention in a private conversation, an unusual meeting with Meghan's PR contacts. Each one seemed trivial until patterns emerged. And once patterns emerge, once connections are seen, the picture becomes impossible to ignore. That's when William knew. This wasn't just coincidental reporting or casual gossip. This was a coordinated effort, and the implications were staggering. Have you ever discovered something about someone you trusted that completely shattered your perception of them? That gut-wrenching mix of disbelief, betrayal, and anger? That was William. Each revelation was another piece of cold evidence, and each piece compounded the pain. But what really drove the point home was the timing. The leaks, the stories, the subtle shifts in public perception all occurred during critical moments in the royal calendar. Birthdays, charitable initiatives, public appearances, moments when Kate deserved to shine, to be celebrated, to be supported. And yet, the shadows of manipulation followed her, carefully timed and seemingly orchestrated. And here's the most shocking part. The very people Harry was allegedly working with weren't random journalists or casual media contacts. These were professionals, experts in the art of public perception, seasoned strategists who understood how to craft narratives, plant stories, and ensure maximum impact. In other words, this wasn't just gossip or family squabbles leaking to the press. This was strategy, intentional, calculated. And if William's suspicions were correct, Harry wasn't merely a passive participant. He was an active collaborator. At this point, you might be wondering, why would he do this? Why target Kate? What could possibly motivate a prince to potentially undermine his sister-in-law? a woman who had welcomed him into the family, shared moments of joy and hardship, and represented stability within the royal household. The answer is complicated, layered, and steeped in personal dynamics, long-standing rivalries, and the intense pressure of public life. And it's not something that could be understood in a single conversation or explained with simple reasoning. No, this is a story that required investigation, patience, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. William's journey through this discovery was far from easy. Imagine the emotional strain, the sense of duty to his family, the loyalty to his brother, the need to protect Kate, and the inescapable awareness that the world would judge every action he took. Every move had to be calculated, every reaction considered. One wrong step, one misinterpreted action, and the narrative could turn against him. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. Pieces of correspondence, subtle patterns in media stories, and direct communications from PR operatives painted a picture that was hard to ignore. In the midst of this tension, William faced a critical choice. Confront Harry immediately, risk escalating the situation publicly, or gather more evidence, prepare a counter-strategy, and approach the problem strategically. It was a classic dilemma. Act too soon, and you might make things worse. Act too late, and the damage could be irreversible. But this wasn't just a strategic decision, it was deeply personal. The betrayal cut through the layers of protocol, duty, and public expectation. It was a wound that demanded attention, resolution, and, ultimately, exposure. You might be asking yourself right now, how does one even uncover such secrets? How do private messages, backroom discussions, and strategic leaks come to light in a world so tightly controlled? For William, it wasn't luck. It was a combination of intuition, observation, and careful investigation. Every small anomaly, every seemingly insignificant interaction was scrutinized. Patterns emerged, and slowly, the network of communication became visible. Names, dates, messages, and meetings all formed a tapestry that revealed a troubling truth. Harry's involvement in a calculated campaign that could harm Kate's reputation and, by extension, the integrity of the royal family. And while this may sound like palace drama taken to an extreme, think about the stakes. We're not just talking about gossip columns or viral headlines. We're talking about the public image of the monarchy, the personal relationships of a family under constant scrutiny, and the emotional toll of betrayal at the highest levels. Every story, every narrative pushed by the PR team had potential consequences: media frenzy, public opinion shifts, and even tension within diplomatic circles. The stakes were astronomical. William's next steps were critical. He couldn't act on suspicion alone. He needed evidence, corroboration, and a plan. And as he delved deeper into the communications, documents, and whispered reports, the reality became clearer. This wasn't a one-off incident. This was a sustained effort. And the more he uncovered, the more alarming it became. It wasn't just about shaping stories against Kate. It was about positioning narratives in ways that could redefine public perception, manipulate sympathies, and subtly undermine trust within the family. What William realized next would send shockwaves through the palace. It was a document, small, easily overlooked, but containing a sequence of communications that connected Harry directly to the PR team, mapping out when stories would be released, which angles would be emphasized, and how the public would be influenced. It was meticulous, deliberate, and cold. The kind of evidence that left no room for doubt. And when he read it, a mix of disbelief, anger, and resolve washed over him. For William, this was more than politics, strategy, or public image. This was personal. This was family. The trust broken by a sibling, the manipulation of stories about a woman he loved, and the exposure of private intentions to public scrutiny. It was all intertwined. And as he pieced together the timeline, the emails, the subtle nods, and the orchestrated leaks, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The royal family would never be the same after this revelation. And yet, the story didn't end there. The deeper William dug, the more he realized the complexity of the network. Meghan's PR team, professional and calculating, had layers of coordination that made them difficult to trace. Yet, each new layer only confirmed what William feared most. This was an orchestrated campaign designed with intent, precision, and strategic insight. And if left unchecked, the consequences could ripple through the monarchy, affecting public perception, family relationships, and even the line of succession. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What was in that seemingly innocent message that had William's heart racing and his mind spinning? Could a single line of text really unravel years of trust, family loyalty, and brotherly bonds? It seemed almost impossible. Yet, in the world of palace whispers and strategic media leaks, even the smallest message could hold explosive power. This wasn't just a casual chat between siblings. This was something more calculated, more deliberate, and more dangerous than William could have imagined. It began on a quiet evening in Kensington Palace. William had been reviewing schedules and preparations for upcoming royal engagements when a notification pinged, a message flagged as unusual. At first glance, it looked mundane. A few lines, seemingly casual in tone. But something about the phrasing, the timing, and the source triggered alarm bells. William's instincts, honed by years of navigating public scrutiny and private diplomacy, told him this was no ordinary correspondence. There was a pattern here, a rhythm, a subtle intent. And when he delved further, his stomach tightened. Imagine discovering that a sibling you grew up with, someone you shared laughter, secrets, and childhood adventures with, could be quietly plotting actions that might harm the very family you both cherished. It's a gut punch. It's disorienting. It shakes the very foundation of what you thought you knew. William read the message again, line by line, and with each pass, the words seemed less innocent, more strategic, more manipulative. What made it worse was the context. The message wasn't sent in isolation. It was part of a chain, a series of communications that had been carefully timed and subtly coordinated. Each line connected to another email, another meeting, another leak. It was as if a hidden map had been drawn right under William's nose, a blueprint of influence and manipulation. And at the center of that map was Kate, the target of a campaign designed to shift public perception in ways that could destabilize her image and reputation. William leaned back in his chair, trying to process it all. How could Harry, his own brother, be involved in something so clandestine? Why would he collaborate with Meghan's PR team to orchestrate a smear campaign, even in subtle ways? It didn't fit with the image he had of his brother. And yet, the evidence was stacking up. There were patterns, recurring coincidences, timing that couldn't be explained by chance. Headlines followed, public perception shifted, and William realized this was no accident. Have you ever seen someone you love act in ways completely contrary to everything you believed about them? Have you ever been forced to confront the painful truth that trust can be weaponized, that familial loyalty can be bent or broken? That was William's reality, and the emotional weight was crushing. Betrayal isn't just about facts or evidence. It's about the gut-wrenching feeling that someone you held close, someone you confided in, has used that intimacy to manipulate outcomes, to gain advantage, or to protect someone else's agenda at the expense of your family. The next step was clear. He had to trace the origin of the message. Where had it come from? Who was involved? Was this just Harry acting alone, or was it part of a larger, orchestrated strategy? William knew better than to jump to conclusions. Assumptions could be dangerous, especially in a palace environment where information is currency and misinterpretation can have lasting consequences. He had to investigate methodically, carefully, and strategically. As William began cross-referencing the message with other communications, a more disturbing picture emerged. There were subtle references to media placement, timing of press releases, and even hints at the angles to be emphasized. The coordination suggested insider knowledge, access to channels that most people wouldn't have. This wasn't casual gossip. This was a blueprint for influence, executed with precision. And every thread seemed to loop back to Meghan's PR team, implicating not just Harry, but a professional network working to shape narratives in their favor. William's mind raced. Could this really be happening? Was his brother truly complicit? And if so, to what extent? The more he dug, the more he realized the layers of deception were profound. There were coded references, seemingly innocent language that, when pieced together, revealed strategy, intent, and timing. It was like discovering a hidden map in plain sight, a map that only someone with experience and insight could decode. And William had that insight. He thought about Kate. What would she feel if she knew? How could she be protected from a campaign designed to subtly undermine her, shape public perception, and manipulate sympathy? It wasn't just about reputation. It was about dignity, emotional safety, and the integrity of her role within the family and the public eye. William's protective instincts kicked in. He couldn't sit idly by while someone used the tools of influence against his family. But this wasn't just a battle over headlines. This was personal. The message had crossed a line, from casual communication to orchestrated strategy. And the implications were staggering. If left unchecked, these tactics could continue, escalating into full-blown media campaigns that would frame Kate in ways she didn't deserve. William knew the stakes: family trust, public perception, and the delicate balance of power within the monarchy. Every action, every decision mattered. Now, here's where it gets even more complicated. William had to consider the optics. If he confronted Harry openly, it could spark public speculation, feeding the very narrative Harry and Meghan might be attempting to control. If he acted too covertly, evidence could be destroyed or misinterpreted. The palace environment is unforgiving. Every word, every glance, every decision is scrutinized. William was trapped between the need to protect Kate, the duty to his family, and the reality of public life under relentless media attention. Imagine being in his position, piecing together messages, uncovering patterns, and realizing that the person you trusted implicitly may have been orchestrating a campaign against your spouse, subtly, strategically, and professionally. It's a scenario most people can't even fathom. And yet, William faced it head-on, balancing anger, disbelief, and determination. He had to understand the full scope before acting. Hours turned into days as William traced the messages, cross-referenced emails, and connected the dots. He consulted with trusted advisors, legal counsel, and palace aides. Each new layer revealed more complexity: PR strategies designed to mislead, leaks timed to coincide with sensitive family moments, and subtle manipulations of public perception. It wasn't just Harry and Meghan's PR team. It was a sophisticated, coordinated effort that required deep investigation. By this point, William's disbelief had transformed into resolve. This was no longer about suspicion. It was about evidence, clarity, and preparation. Every detail mattered: timestamps, phrasing, context. Even the smallest inconsistencies were clues. He couldn't afford to overlook anything. And as he compiled the evidence, a chilling realization settled in. This went deeper than personal rivalry or sibling tension. It was a calculated strategy with real-world consequences for his family, their public image, and the monarchy as a whole. William's next move would set the stage for the confrontation that would follow. He knew the power of timing and preparation. Acting impulsively could be disastrous. Waiting too long could allow the orchestrators of the campaign to adjust, cover their tracks, or escalate further. Every decision required precision, strategy, and foresight. And in the palace, mistakes are magnified, rumors are amplified, and intentions are questioned endlessly. Have you ever had to gather proof against someone you love? Have you ever weighed the need for truth against the risk of further harm? William was living that reality. Each piece of evidence brought him closer to understanding the scope of the alleged backdoor deal. Each connection, each subtle message, each timing anomaly reinforced the uncomfortable truth. His brother may have been orchestrating actions to subtly manipulate, influence, and, in some ways, attack Kate's public image. And yet, even as William pieced this puzzle together, one nagging question persisted. Why? Why risk the relationship with family, the loyalty to tradition, and the bond between siblings for a campaign that could easily backfire? What was the endgame? The answers weren't obvious, and that uncertainty made the situation even more tense, more dangerous, and more emotionally charged. But just when William thought he had unraveled the first layer, he discovered something that changed everything. A hidden correspondence that suggested this wasn't just a single effort or a temporary lapse in judgment. It hinted at an ongoing strategy with multiple touchpoints, carefully timed releases, and professional coordination. And it was far more serious than he could have anticipated. The message that seemed harmless at first glance was merely the entry point. It was the first breadcrumb in a trail that would lead to shocking discoveries about his brother, the PR team, and the lengths some would go to manipulate narratives. And as William traced the next steps, he realized he was standing on the edge of a revelation that would shake the royal family to its core. But what he discovered next, the hidden network, the secret strategy, the orchestrated efforts, would make him question everything he thought he knew about trust, loyalty, and family. And no one, not even the palace insiders, could have anticipated the storm that was about to erupt. What if everything you thought you knew about your own brother was a carefully constructed illusion? Imagine peeling back the curtains, walking past the polished floors and golden chandeliers, only to discover a hidden layer of secrecy, manipulation, and strategy that nobody was supposed to see. That's exactly where William found himself after tracing the first suspicious messages. What lay behind the palace doors was far more intricate, calculated, and chilling than he could have anticipated. It started with subtle observations. William noticed small irregularities in Harry's behavior, timing of private calls, evasive answers in casual conversations, and a growing insistence on secrecy around seemingly trivial matters. At first, he questioned himself. Was this paranoia? A byproduct of palace stress? But instinct, sharpened by years of navigating public scrutiny, told him there was more to it. Something was happening behind those doors, and it involved more than just sibling rivalry. Think about this. In a family like theirs, every gesture, every word, every interaction is observed, recorded, and analyzed. The walls of the palace have ears, cameras capture moments, and courtiers report the slightest anomalies. Yet, Harry had managed to maneuver in these spaces without detection, or so it seemed. His movements were subtle, his communications encrypted, his approach methodical. And when William dug deeper, he discovered that what looked like casual conversations or fleeting interactions were actually strategic maneuvers. The first breakthrough came from a chain of emails, surprisingly detailed, that William managed to access with the help of a trusted aide. Each email was innocuous on the surface, polite, and conversational. But when viewed in sequence, a pattern emerged, one that hinted at coordination with Meghan's PR team, timed leaks, and media narratives designed to subtly influence public perception of Kate. It wasn't just a few headlines. It was a campaign, a strategy that seemed to anticipate reactions, manipulate timing, and shift sympathies. William's initial reaction was disbelief. Could his brother really be involved in something so calculated? Could Harry, the same man who had been a childhood confidant, a co-conspirator in pranks and adventures, now be participating in a plan that could harm his sister-in-law? The contradiction was jarring. On the one hand, there was the Harry William had grown up with, loyal, impulsive, protective. On the other, there was this version of Harry, methodical, strategic, calculating. The juxtaposition was unsettling, and it left William grappling with emotions he hadn't anticipated: anger, betrayal, confusion, and sadness all tangled together. But here's where it gets even more complex. The plan wasn't purely personal. It was layered with professional precision. Meghan's PR team was involved, meaning Harry wasn't acting alone. He had collaborators, advisors, and strategists shaping narratives, planting stories, and guiding media placement. William realized that if he wanted to understand the scope, he had to think like them, consider every angle, anticipate every move, and recognize that the palace itself was only one stage in a much larger performance. Have you ever encountered a situation where the people closest to you are acting with such secrecy that it becomes impossible to know who is friend or foe? William felt that tension acutely. Each interaction with Harry now carried weight. Each casual remark could be interpreted as a clue or a trap, and yet, he had to remain composed. One misstep, one rash reaction, and he could play right into the hands of the orchestrators. The stakes were enormous, not just for Kate, not just for family trust, but for the public perception of the monarchy itself. The evidence continued to mount. Hidden in Harry's seemingly routine communications were indications of coordinated efforts to leak stories, influence social media trends, and shape media coverage in ways that subtly undermined Kate. There were references to timing, phrasing, and context, almost like a blueprint for manipulation. It was professional, calculated, and methodical, and William realized the deeper he looked, the more complex the network became. And yet, William faced a dilemma. He couldn't confront Harry directly without risking escalation. A direct confrontation could alert the PR team, escalate tensions, and create public speculation. On the other hand, waiting too long could allow the orchestrated efforts to continue unchecked, potentially causing irreparable harm to Kate's reputation. It was a delicate balance, a strategic game played behind the polished walls of the palace, where every move had consequences. William began piecing together a timeline. Specific stories about Kate would appear shortly after meetings Harry allegedly had with Meghan's PR advisors. Certain narrative angles, subtly critical or slightly misleading, would surface at just the right moment to create doubt or raise eyebrows in public discourse. It wasn't overtly malicious, nothing so obvious as to be immediately recognized, but it was enough to influence perception subtly, shaping public opinion without leaving an obvious trail. The palace, for all its grandeur and historical weight, became a backdrop for this hidden chess match. Meetings in private rooms, conversations in corridors, and encrypted digital communications all played a role. William knew that unraveling this network required patience, intelligence, and strategic insight. Every detail mattered. The time an email was sent, the phrasing of a text, the timing of a media appearance. Each piece of the puzzle was critical to understanding the full scope. As William delved deeper, he discovered evidence that suggested Harry wasn't merely participating passively. He was actively involved in guiding the narrative, coordinating with the PR team, and shaping the timing of story releases. It was meticulous work, almost surgical in precision, and it revealed a side of Harry William hadn't expected, a side capable of strategic foresight, patience, and deliberate influence. Imagine the emotional weight of this realization. One brother, secretly maneuvering behind closed doors. A PR team executing strategies designed to subtly undermine your wife. And you, caught between loyalty to family and the need to protect those you love. The mix of disbelief, anger, and determination is almost overwhelming. William understood that he couldn't ignore it. He had to gather more evidence, anticipate the next moves, and prepare a counter-strategy. But there were even more surprising layers. Some communications hinted at back-channel discussions with journalists and media outlets, subtly planting stories or angles to sway public perception. Certain reports that had seemed coincidental suddenly appeared coordinated when cross-referenced with private emails and message timestamps. William realized this was a multi-layered operation, blending personal ambition, professional strategy, and media manipulation. Have you ever realized too late that the coincidences you trusted were orchestrated? That what seemed random was actually deliberate? That was William's situation. Every seemingly casual story, every social media post, every public reaction was being influenced by a hidden hand. And the most shocking revelation? Harry, the person William had once confided in, may have been at the center of it all. Now, here's where the tension escalates. William understood that confronting Harry directly was risky. It could trigger defensiveness, obfuscation, or worse, denial that could make tracking the truth even more difficult. Yet, he couldn't remain passive. Kate's reputation, the integrity of the family, and the perception of the monarchy were at stake. And so William began crafting a plan, methodical, strategic, and precise. Every move had to be calculated, every step deliberate, because in this game of secrecy and influence, a single mistake could be disastrous. The palace became a stage for this silent drama, a battleground where whispers, coded messages, and strategic timing intersected. William's every observation, every deduction, brought him closer to uncovering the truth about Harry's secret moves. And yet, with each discovery, the complexity grew. He realized this wasn't a simple betrayal. It was a carefully orchestrated strategy, executed with intent and precision, designed to influence public opinion and subtly undermine Kate. But just as William began connecting all the dots, a piece of evidence surfaced that would change the game entirely. Something so subtle, yet so explosive that it reframed the entire narrative. It wasn't just emails, messages, or leaked stories. It was proof of deliberate coordination, a strategy that showed premeditation, intent, and collaboration at the highest levels. And as William held this evidence in his hands, the stakes became crystal clear. The confrontation, the exposure, and the reckoning were inevitable. And what came next would be even more shocking. Evidence that revealed not just Harry's actions, but the larger machinery that made this backdoor campaign possible, implicating others within the palace network and the PR infrastructure itself. William realized that he was standing on the edge of a revelation that could reshape everything the public thought they knew about the royal family. Have you ever wondered how narratives are shaped without you even realizing it? How the stories that appear in headlines, the viral social media posts, and even casual whispers in public discourse are often the result of careful orchestration. That's exactly what William uncovered as he began tracing the hidden agenda behind Meghan's PR team. And the deeper he dug, the more it became clear. This was not just about controlling the media. It was about controlling perception, shaping reputations, and, in subtle but powerful ways, undermining Kate. It started with the smallest details. A seemingly innocent press release here, a carefully worded article there, each one timed perfectly to coincide with Kate's public engagements. At first glance, it could appear coincidental. The media loves drama, and the press thrives on royal appearances. But William, experienced in the world of palace optics, recognized patterns that were far too precise to be random. Every narrative, every angle, every subtle critique pointed to deliberate coordination. And when he traced the emails, the internal memos, and the communications within Meghan's PR circle, the intent became undeniable. Imagine sitting in a room, reviewing a collection of emails, strategy documents, and meeting notes that reveal a professional network designed to manipulate perception. Each message is polite on the surface, courteous, and seemingly innocent. But underneath, there is a calculated intent. Select what stories reach the public, decide how Kate is portrayed, and subtly frame public sentiment in ways that favor certain narratives. It's not just storytelling. It's a game of influence played with meticulous precision. And Harry, William realized with growing alarm, was allegedly in the middle of it. Have you ever experienced the creeping realization that someone you trust is playing a role in a story you didn't know existed? That was William's position. For decades, he had trusted Harry implicitly, relying on his brother for support, camaraderie, and partnership in navigating the pressures of public life. Now, the foundation of that trust was crumbling under the weight of evidence. The PR team's agenda wasn't just strategic, it was personal. And its focus, subtle as it was, seemed pointed at Kate. William studied the memos meticulously. There were directives about timing, emphasis, and placement. Headlines were crafted to appear spontaneous, but they followed a rhythm. Social media posts, meant to gauge public opinion, were timed to maximize exposure. Stories highlighting small missteps, minor errors, or perceived slights were amplified in a controlled, deliberate manner. It was as if the PR team had created a blueprint for shaping public perception, using every tool at their disposal. And according to the trail of evidence, Harry had knowledge, perhaps even involvement, in each calculated move. Think about that for a moment. A sibling, someone you grew up with, potentially orchestrating or collaborating in a strategy that could undermine your partner. The emotional weight of that realization is immense. William knew he had to stay composed. Any misstep, any visible reaction, could play into the very hands of those manipulating perception. The stakes were not just personal, they were public, strategic, and far-reaching. The more William examined, the clearer it became that Meghan's PR team operated with an almost surgical precision. Their strategy wasn't about making headlines for the sake of attention. It was about shaping narratives, controlling angles, and influencing perception at multiple levels. Every press release, every social media story, every subtle leak seemed interconnected. And in reviewing the timeline, William began to see how the pieces fit together, a deliberate pattern that suggested long-term planning. The psychological component of the PR strategy was just as striking. Certain stories were crafted to evoke specific emotions, sympathy for one figure, doubt for another, admiration for a third. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet deeply effective. Headlines that seemed neutral carried undertones designed to influence perception. Social media commentary was subtly guided by prepositioned influencers and suggested narratives. The coordination was remarkable in its scope and sophistication, revealing a level of planning William hadn't expected. And yet, what made this most alarming was the implication. The PR team wasn't operating independently. If William's suspicions were correct, Harry was aware of their strategies, potentially collaborating, and certainly benefiting from the public outcomes. This wasn't just manipulation for career advancement, notoriety, or general public relations. This was manipulation targeted at someone William cared deeply about, someone whose dignity and public image were being subtly eroded. William reflected on the ethical breach. How does one respond when a sibling, allegedly in concert with professionals, engages in a campaign that manipulates public perception against a loved one? There was the family dimension, the personal betrayal, the erosion of trust. There was the public dimension, the potential to shape headlines, sway opinion, and influence perception of Kate and her role within the monarchy. And there was the strategic dimension, navigating a complex network of communication, timing, and influence to anticipate next moves while protecting family integrity. Have you ever been caught in a situation where the complexity of deceit seemed almost impossible to navigate? That's where William found himself. Each new memo, each new communication from the PR team revealed yet another layer of planning. The sophistication of the operation indicated professional guidance, strategic foresight, and premeditated coordination. And at the center of it all, potentially, was Harry. But here's where it gets even more intense. William began to notice subtle contradictions within the PR strategy itself. Certain narratives seemed at odds with others, revealing a tension between what was being promoted and what the orchestrators wanted hidden. This contradiction suggested either overreach, a misstep, or internal conflict within the PR team. For William, it was a clue, a crack in the armor that could be exploited to understand the full scope of the operation. He started mapping the connections. Every email, every scheduled release, every media contact was charted against public events, Kate's appearances, and Harry's movements. The network began to take shape. Patterns emerged. Predictable sequences became visible. And with that visibility came clarity. It was no longer speculation. It was evidence of strategic coordination, carefully timed to achieve a particular effect, to influence perception, to subtly undermine, and to control the narrative surrounding Kate. And yet, William realized this was only part of the picture. The PR team's agenda extended beyond immediate stories. There were long-term objectives, campaigns designed to shape public perception over months, even years. Narrative arcs, emotional beats, and strategic messaging were orchestrated with precision. Every small story fed into a larger strategy, and every leak was part of a carefully planned cascade designed to maximize impact. Now, consider the emotional impact. For William, this wasn't just about strategy or public image. It was about trust, family loyalty, and the realization that someone he loved and trusted could be implicated in a campaign against someone he cherished. The sense of betrayal was deep, cutting through layers of protocol, duty, and public responsibility. Each new revelation brought anger, disbelief, and an urgent need for resolution. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. Hidden in the communications was evidence that suggested the PR team had direct lines to media outlets, journalists, and influencers who were prepared to act at precise moments. Certain stories had been pre-positioned, ready to release in alignment with public events or private family developments. The coordination was meticulous, professional, and highly effective. And at the center of it, again, was Harry. This evidence raised the stakes to an entirely new level. It wasn't just that narratives were being shaped. It was that a deliberate network of influence existed, designed to manipulate, to guide, and to control perception at multiple levels. And William knew that exposing this network, while necessary, would require careful planning. One misstep, one premature revelation, could compromise the evidence, alert the orchestrators, and allow the campaign to continue unchecked. So, William prepared. He began compiling evidence, tracing communication threads, and planning his next steps. The goal wasn't just confrontation, it was understanding, preparation, and ultimately, protection. He had to understand the full scope of the PR team's agenda, Harry's involvement, and the implications for Kate, the family, and the public perception of the monarchy. And what William uncovered next would not only confirm his worst suspicions, but also reveal the true depth of the PR team's hidden agenda and the shocking role Harry allegedly played in its execution. It was a revelation that would force a confrontation, test family loyalties, and set the stage for a public reckoning that no one in the palace could ignore. But what came next, the evidence linking Harry directly to the strategic manipulation of narratives, was more explosive than William could have anticipated, and it would leave the entire royal family on edge. Imagine standing at the center of a storm you never saw coming. Imagine living under constant scrutiny, where every smile, every gesture, every carefully chosen word is analyzed, judged, and twisted. For Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, that storm was about to intensify, and she didn't know it yet. Behind the palace walls, a hidden campaign, orchestrated with precision, had begun targeting her reputation, subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but insidious enough to influence public perception over time. William knew what was happening long before Kate did. He had traced the communications, examined the strategies, and connected the dots linking Harry to Meghan's PR team. He saw how minor headlines, carefully timed articles, and social media murmurs were all part of a subtle campaign designed to shape narratives against Kate. But he also knew one crucial fact. Kate would never see it coming, and that made the situation all the more dangerous. The campaign was sophisticated. Stories that seemed coincidental weren't. Timing was everything. Headlines subtly emphasized small mistakes or awkward moments, portraying Kate in ways that invited scrutiny or doubt. Even positive stories were sometimes reframed to highlight minor flaws, subtly eroding public perception. For the casual observer, these seemed harmless. For those watching closely, patterns began to emerge. William, with his insight and experience, recognized the strategy immediately. But for Kate, the first signs were confusing, emotionally taxing, and ultimately isolating. Have you ever felt the sting of being judged unfairly? Of seeing whispers and half-truths shape perceptions of who you are, even when you know the reality is completely different? Kate was about to face that on a scale most of us can't imagine. Her public life had always been highly visible, but this campaign introduced an element of personal attack, disguised as media coverage, that threatened to undermine her reputation and, by extension, the stability of the family image. The first wave came subtly. A story about a minor wardrobe mishap at a public engagement was framed in a way that drew unnecessary attention to her appearance. Social media commentary amplified the story, drawing in opinions from fans and critics alike. On its own, it might have been negligible, but when viewed as part of a broader pattern, coinciding with Harry's communications and the PR team's strategy, it became clear that this was orchestrated, not accidental. William watched silently, analyzing every move. He understood the psychological impact such campaigns could have on a person like Kate. The Duchess had always been composed, measured, and resilient, but even the strongest individuals can feel the weight of coordinated public scrutiny. The subtle attacks, the minor slights, and the carefully managed narratives were all designed to create doubt, insecurity, and distraction. For Kate, it was more than just annoyance. It was emotional manipulation on a grand scale. The timing of the stories was another layer of strategy. Certain articles were released just as Kate was completing major charitable initiatives, attending high-profile engagements, or receiving public accolades. The effect was deliberate, to create contrast, to shift focus, and to subtly undermine her achievements. In other words, just when Kate's efforts should have been celebrated, whispers, questions, and doubts appeared, creating an emotional roller coaster for both her and the public. And then there were the indirect tactics. Social media influencers, sympathetic journalists, and carefully placed commentary subtly framed narratives, questioning Kate's choices, her judgment, or her approach to motherhood and public service. These weren't outright attacks. They were nuanced, almost invisible, but their cumulative effect was significant. William could see the impact. Even casual observers began to notice patterns, while Kate, unaware of the orchestration, faced growing pressure and internalized the subtle critiques. Have you ever been in a situation where small, repeated pressures begin to wear you down, even when you know logically that the criticisms are unfounded? That's what Kate was experiencing. Each minor story, each carefully timed post, was like a small weight pressing down, designed to chip away at confidence and subtly shape perception. And the most insidious part? She had no idea the source of the pressure. It was invisible, strategic, and intentionally concealed. William's frustration grew as he watched the campaign unfold. He knew the public would never understand the orchestration behind the scenes. To them, these were isolated incidents, coincidences, or harmless gossip. But in reality, it was a carefully coordinated operation. Every timing decision, every phrasing choice, every subtle emphasis was engineered to influence how Kate was perceived, both publicly and within palace circles. And the emotional toll on Kate was starting to show. Though she remained outwardly composed, moments of fatigue, hesitation, and frustration became more apparent. Close aides noticed a subtle shift in demeanor, small signs of stress, fleeting expressions of doubt, and moments where her confidence seemed shaken. For someone like Kate, used to balancing public scrutiny with personal composure, these were early warning signs. And William recognized them immediately. The stakes were even higher because this campaign wasn't purely about public perception. It was personal. It was about influence within the family, subtle undermining, and shaping narratives in ways that could destabilize trust and loyalty. Each story, each timing choice, each social media ripple was a calculated move in a broader game, one that potentially involved Harry, Meghan's PR team, and a network of strategists. William had to make a choice. Intervene, expose the network, or gather more evidence. Immediate confrontation risked escalating tensions with Harry, alerting the PR team, and creating media speculation. Waiting too long risked allowing the subtle attacks to continue, potentially damaging Kate's public image irreversibly. The balance was delicate, strategic, and emotionally charged. And then came the first tangible evidence that the campaign had escalated beyond subtle influence. An internal memo from the PR team, accidentally copied to the wrong recipient, revealed instructions that aligned with recent media stories targeting Kate. It wasn't just coincidence anymore. It was proof of strategy, intent, and coordination. The memo's detailed story angles, timing, and narrative emphasis, demonstrating a level of sophistication that went beyond casual media interaction. Imagine reading that memo. Imagine knowing that someone you love, potentially your own brother, is connected to a campaign designed to undermine someone you care about. The emotional impact is staggering. Betrayal, anger, confusion, and an urgent need for action all collide. William felt the weight of responsibility to protect Kate, to confront Harry, and to navigate the intricate web of strategy without triggering unintended consequences. Have you ever realized that subtle attacks can be more damaging than overt ones? That the slow erosion of perception, the careful shaping of narrative, can chip away at confidence and trust without ever being directly confronted? Kate was in the crossfire of a campaign that exemplified this principle. Every subtle move, every minor headline, every social media ripple was a calculated strike designed to influence her perception, the public's view of her, and the emotional equilibrium within the family. And yet, despite the mounting evidence, the full scope was still unclear. William knew there were layers he hadn't uncovered, conversations he hadn't intercepted, and strategies yet to be revealed. The PR team's sophistication suggested contingency plans, hidden channels, and backup strategies designed to maintain influence even if exposure occurred. In other words, the campaign wasn't just active, it was adaptive, capable of evolving to counter any response. The realization struck William like a blow. This was bigger than he had imagined. Kate was not just a target. She was at the center of a carefully orchestrated campaign, one that required professional coordination, strategic foresight, and, potentially, the direct involvement of Harry. The emotional stakes were enormous, the public implications vast, and the personal betrayal profound. But just when William thought he had mapped the initial phase of the campaign, a new piece of evidence surfaced. Something that suggested the PR team was not only targeting Kate, but actively shaping narratives in collaboration with other insiders, amplifying influence through channels William hadn't yet anticipated. And what came next would reveal the true scale of the operation, forcing William to confront a reality even more shocking than he had feared. What if the evidence you needed to expose a betrayal had been sitting in plain sight all along? What if the moment that would confirm your worst suspicions was just waiting for you to notice it? For William, that moment arrived in the form of a single, meticulously detailed email chain, a smoking gun that would change everything. It wasn't flashy, dramatic, or immediately obvious. At first glance, it appeared mundane, almost bureaucratic. But for William, who had been tracing patterns, connecting dots, and piecing together subtle manipulations, it was the proof he needed. The discovery happened on an overcast afternoon, the kind of day that mirrored William's mood perfectly. He had been combing through communications, verifying timelines, and cross-referencing public events with internal correspondence when the email surfaced. It was brief, sent between members of Meghan's PR team, but it contained precise instructions about story timing, narrative angles, and even suggested social media commentary to frame public perception. William's breath caught as he read it. The email outlined the exact type of story that had appeared in the press the previous week, a story that subtly undermined Kate while elevating Meghan's profile. The language was strategic, careful, professional, and manipulative. Each line, though polite on the surface, revealed intent, timing, and coordination. There was no ambiguity here. This wasn't a coincidence, an offhand remark, or a misunderstanding. This was orchestration. And according to the metadata, Harry had been looped into the conversation. Think about the shock of that realization. Your brother, the person you grew up with, the person you shared secrets, jokes, and memories with, allegedly playing a role in a professional strategy designed to influence public opinion against your spouse. The contradiction was staggering. How could someone so close, someone you trusted implicitly, be connected to actions that felt like a direct betrayal? William's mind raced through decades of shared history, searching for answers, context, and understanding, but the evidence was staring him in the face. Have you ever discovered something so profound that it changes your perception of reality entirely? That's exactly what William felt. Each line of the email was a thread, weaving a story of intentional influence, careful timing, and targeted messaging. It wasn't overtly hostile, it was subtle, almost invisible to the casual observer. But for someone who understood strategy, influence, and the stakes involved, it was unmistakable. The email didn't just outline story timing. It referenced past successes, proposed angles for future narratives, and even suggested potential reactions from royal observers and the public. It revealed an understanding of psychology, media behavior, and public perception that went beyond ordinary PR work. This was strategic communication at its highest level, and for William, it was chilling to see that the person he once trusted might be complicit in executing it. The discovery sent William into immediate action. He began tracing the email chain backwards, uncovering a network of messages, meetings, and discussions that mapped out a timeline of influence. Each communication linked to specific media placements, orchestrated leaks, and coordinated messaging. The depth and complexity were staggering. It wasn't a single instance of misjudgment. It was a sustained, deliberate strategy. As he delved deeper, William realized something even more alarming. The campaign was adaptive. The PR team monitored public reaction, adjusted messaging based on audience engagement, and even coordinated responses to potential counter-narratives. It was dynamic, precise, and surprisingly sophisticated. And according to the patterns, Harry had knowledge of each adjustment, each refinement, each strategic pivot. The implications were enormous. Imagine being in William's position. You're holding the evidence that could confirm your worst fears. You're seeing how the narrative was shaped, manipulated, and executed. You understand the stakes, family trust, public perception, and the integrity of the monarchy. And yet, you know that any move you make now could escalate tensions, alert the orchestrators, or even cause unintended fallout. The emotional and strategic weight is immense. The smoking gun revealed more than just coordination, it highlighted intent. Certain story angles were specifically designed to position Kate in a way that contrasted with Meghan's image, subtly questioning judgment, character, and influence. It wasn't overt. The stories were crafted to appear neutral, even positive at times. But the subtext, the timing, and the calculated placement created a perception of imbalance and subtle undermining. And for William, recognizing that intent was critical. Have you ever faced a moment when the proof of a betrayal is undeniable? That clarity is both relieving and devastating at the same time. William felt both emotions in equal measure. Relief that he finally had evidence. Devastation at the reality of the orchestration, the collaboration, and the emotional impact on Kate. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to hold the evidence in your hands, confirming the depth of the strategy. The discovery also raised questions about motive. Why would Harry engage in this? Was it loyalty to Meghan, a desire to assert influence, or something more personal? William didn't have the answers yet, but the evidence suggested more than casual involvement. It pointed to deliberate participation. An understanding motive would be essential for the confrontation to come. As William reviewed the timeline, he noticed a chilling pattern. Key moments in Kate's public schedule coincided with story releases. Minor mishaps, subtle criticisms, and seemingly random narratives all aligned perfectly with planned communications from the PR team. It was precise, methodical, and undeniably coordinated. The more he analyzed, the clearer it became that this was no spontaneous action. It was strategy executed with foresight and expertise. And yet, even with the evidence in hand, William faced another dilemma: what to do next. Confront Harry immediately? Gather more proof? Prepare a strategic counterresponse? Each choice carried risks. Misstep, and the network could adapt. Wait too long, and the subtle attacks could continue. The balance between action and patience became a high-stakes chess game. Have you ever been caught between acting on truth and managing consequences? William was living that reality. Each decision required foresight, restraint, and strategic thinking. The evidence confirmed the worst suspicions, but it also demanded careful handling. Exposing Harry prematurely could escalate tensions, compromise evidence, or even create public speculation that would undermine the monarchy. And then came the next discovery: an attachment to the email, a detailed plan outlining narrative sequences for the coming months. It referenced not only media outlets, but social media influencers, suggested public reactions, and even included contingencies for unexpected developments. This was no casual PR effort. It was a meticulously orchestrated campaign. And William realized that, at its center, Harry had been more than aware. He may have been an active participant. The weight of realization hit him. This was not a minor issue. This was personal, strategic, and potentially explosive. Kate's reputation, the trust within the family, and public perception of the monarchy were all at stake. Every detail mattered. Every step forward had to be calculated, precise, and deliberate. But just when William thought he understood the full scope, he discovered a final component of the email chain. A message that connected Harry directly to the PR team in a way that left no room for doubt. It wasn't speculation anymore. It wasn't assumption. It was confirmation. Harry had knowledge, potentially involvement, and the power to influence the campaign's execution. And what came next, the confrontation, the reckoning, the truth revealed to the family, would be more dramatic than William could have imagined. The smoking gun wasn't just evidence. It was the catalyst that would force action, test loyalties, and set the stage for a family confrontation that would shake the palace to its core. What do you do when the person you trust the most turns out to be involved in a betrayal you never imagined? For William, that question became painfully real. The evidence was irrefutable. The patterns were undeniable. Harry, his own brother, appeared to have been involved in a strategic campaign designed to manipulate public perception, undermine Kate, and coordinate with Meghan's PR team. It wasn't gossip anymore. It was fact. And now came the hardest part: confrontation. William knew the stakes. A family confrontation at this level wasn't like an argument over dinner. This was a collision of personal betrayal, public perception, and royal duty. Every word, every expression, every movement would be scrutinized, interpreted, and remembered. The palace had witnessed disagreements before, but nothing like this. The implications went beyond sibling rivalry. They threatened to fracture the very foundation of the family and ignite public scrutiny at the highest level. He had to be strategic. Walking into the room unprepared could escalate tensions, provoke denial, or allow Harry to deflect, leaving the campaign unchallenged. Yet, waiting too long risked the continuation of the subtle attacks and manipulations. William prepared meticulously, reviewing evidence, analyzing every email, and reconstructing timelines. He had to confront his brother armed with facts, not emotions. But emotions were unavoidable. The sting of betrayal, the weight of responsibility to Kate, and the protective instinct for his family pressed heavily on him. The confrontation began in a private room, far from the cameras, the public eye, and even most palace staff. The tension was immediate. William didn't waste time on pleasantries. He laid out the evidence, carefully, methodically, and with a precision designed to minimize defensiveness. Every email, every memo, every pattern was presented as fact. There was no ambiguity. There was no room for misinterpretation. Harry's initial reaction was a mixture of surprise and defensiveness. Short sentences, careful phrasing, attempts to minimize involvement. But William noticed the subtle contradictions in his words. Small hesitations, glances away, and phrasing that didn't match the evidence. It was clear that Harry hadn't anticipated the depth of William's investigation. He hadn't expected a